Welcome all of you to a new episode of this podcast called Samtal, runt Östersjön, talking about the Baltic Sea, a podcast where we meet the heroes of the Baltic Sea. This is a podcast we do to celebrate the Baltic Sea Fund that is turning 30 years this year, and my name is Jens Berg. And today we will discuss probably the most important issue of all important issues concerning the Baltic Sea. We will discuss climate change and the impact on the Baltic Sea. In each episode of this podcast, we meet one of the persons that has won the Baltic Sea Fund prize during the years, and this award winner discuss with one of the members of the Baltic Sea Fund delegation. And the persons that we're going to discuss climate change today with are two of the greatest experts we have in Europe. Not bad, I would say. First, it's an honor for me to welcome Professor Hans von Storch from Hamburg, Germany. Welcome, Hans.
Hi, guten Tag.
Guten Tag. It's an honor to have you here, Hans. You, Hans, won the prize 2014 for shedding light on the effects of climate change on the Baltic Sea and for giving an exemplary contribution to compilation of fragmentary information and knowledge into a comprehensive picture of the impact of climate change in the region. This is straight from the motivation that was written when you got the prize 2014. I would like, Hans, to start with a couple of basic questions to get the context right for the listeners here. We all know, Hans, that the Baltic Sea is vulnerable. But why? What makes the Baltic Sea special and extra vulnerable for climate change?
I'm not sure if I would agree to that statement.
Okay, please go ahead and disagree.
It is vulnerable, but if it is more vulnerable than, say, the Bohai in China, I don't know. And we have not responded to that question. We have not raised that question. So with our project, the idea was to say, let us document what the knowledge is we have on the state of the Baltic Sea and its sensitivity to climate change, how climate change evolves here or emerges, and what the perspectives are, and to what extent are we agreeing on this or are we not agreeing on it. So it was mostly a report about knowledge and not a report about climate.
Hans, 85 million people are living around the Baltic Sea. It is a huge amount of people compared to the size of the sea. How unique would you say that this is?
Again, if I compare it with the Bohai, I don't know. There are also very many people. I mean, think of Tianjin, which is already almost 20 millions. And if you add Beijing, oh God, yes, then you are already lost. So I can't say that. But, I mean, the special thing about the Baltic Sea is first of all, I mean, it's an interesting type of sea. It is semi-enclosed. So the link to the open ocean is quite small. It is a young sea. It's, 10,000 years old about? And we have very many, very diverse countries around the Baltic Sea. Some of them were just 30 years ago behind what we call the Iron Curtain. Some states didn't exist, such as Latvia. So we have a very rich history and political culture and social culture around these. And I think that makes it, first of all, interesting. And then we have lots of interesting physical things. We have lots of interesting biological things. So it is a very good case to study, and it is important for the people living in this area. But I would not say that if I would sit in Melbourne and had to decide to study a regional sea, which is most interesting in the world, I would not know if I would end up with the Baltic Sea. There may be others which are also very important. But for us, also for our identity, I think it is the Baltic Sea. And also my summer cottage is just next to the Baltic Sea.
And today, Hans will discuss with another great expert on climate change and the development of the Baltic Sea during times. It's an honor to welcome Ilppo Vuorinen. Welcome, Ilppo.
Päivää.
Päivää, good dag. Ilppo is a member of the delegation of the Baltic Sea Fund and professor emeritus from the University of Turku. Ilppo is also an author of many books dealing with these issues. Ilppo, also a couple of basic questions to you before I hand over the microphones to you. The Baltic Sea has always changed during times, from the Ice Age to the Iron and Bronze Ages. Briefly, Ilppo, when you have looked on this development with a really long-term perspective, what has happened with the speed of change?
That's a good question. In some aspects, the speed has been and still is very slow. Like I'm thinking about how this environment is still recovering from the last ice age. So we have the land rising with slow speed, not likely to increase. But then other things, those that are connected with the climate change, they have been very fast indeed. I mean, I remember first starting to think about the climate change back in the 80s. And since then, the speed has nothing but increased. So, quite a large question, I would say.
Yeah, I started with an easy one for you also. But Ilppo, which parameters are the crucial ones to follow? I know we are talking a lot about temperature that is rising, but which other parameters are those ones to follow? Would you say when we talk about the development during times?
As a biologist, when I think about the temperature as an environmental factor, that's not a problem for life. I mean, like the temperature we experience every year, minus 30, plus 30. And then we go to sauna every now and then. But one thing that we should follow is the sea level. If sea level is raised by 1 meter, half of Helsinki will drown. Or the most important half, I would say. So it's not the temperature, although the discussion started with increased temperature. But I think there are more crucial aspects, like sea level rising.
Mm. We also know, Ilppo, that we have a natural climate change going on in the Baltic Sea. But what is different between the natural climate change and the change caused by humans?
Well, quickly said, nothing. They go in the same direction. Winter temperatures during the last 300 years or so, they have been going up. So we tend to have milder winters. And we know that development started well before Industrial Revolution. And then came human impact. But it's having the same effect.
As you can hear, this will be an interesting discussion, I promise you. Ilppo Vuorinen in a unique discussion with Hans von Storch. I will now lean back and let you two do the talking, and I will be back with a couple of questions to you after your discussion.
So when I was asked to prepare a series of questions, it was obvious for me where I should start. I'm interested to hear how it started with you. When I first remember myself thinking about that something's happening in the climate, I remember I had started my first job in Finnish Institute of Marine Research back in 1985, but the realizing the onset of climate change didn't come from there. It was just my personal memories from my childhood that we used to go skiing in the city of Turku. And then in the 80s, nobody was doing that. And then I started to actually start a discussion during the coffee breaks at the Institute of Marine Research that haven't you seen a change happening? And I was not laughed out, but there was a silence. And after that's my first memory. So how it is with you, Hans? When did it start for you?
I guess I'm among those who, at the FMI, who would not follow you. I've never really experienced climate change myself. At least I've never interpreted it this way. So first of all, I know that my memory is false. So the memory has certain functions, so it makes the past smooth and easily explainable. So we have lots of people who say this was that we in former times we had always snow. I'm talking not about Finland. And if you look into the data, this was not so. Christmas was not always white, but most people say it was. So I don't trust these personal beliefs, even though some people may have a wonderful, good memory like you, Ilppo. But I also know that I myself would not trust my memory. But I came to that as a scientist because this topic came on the agenda, and in the first 10 years of my career or so, we spoke about climate change, such as natural variability, El Nino, and things of that sort. And seriously, it came to this business after we heard in the early 1990s, all over the time, specifically by Munich Re, that storms would become more violent. Our storms. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about tropical storms. And I was then sent out from my director that I should talk with another insurance company because they wanted to hear something. So I went to the German Weather Service and asked them for information. And it turned out they had done something, and there was no change in storminess. So Munich Re said something which was not based on data. Actually, I asked them for that because they had no data. They had data on damages. But the damage depends on wind plus, a bit more, plus how much can be damaged. But they never said that. And obviously, they had a commercial interest in this story because if people believe that the risk is rising, then they're also willing to pay more for it. And for some strange reason, the public accepted this advice by an institution which would have a good reason for being biased. They even said, even industry is saying it now. So it must be true because industry is bad, But this was not the case. So it was essentially an unbased statement they made. So I came into this business and in particular also into this question, which was a hallmark of the institution I was with at that time, the Max Planck Institute for Meteorology, in this issue of where can we see that climate change is going on and why can we say it is related to CO2 and greenhouse gases or the sun or aerosols or whatever it is. So we went into that. So I'm totally cold about climate change. So I'm not getting excited. It's not my baby, the climate. I'm not crying when this baby is changing. But we can say from our studies, yes, the change we've seen in temperature as indicated, I'm not saying as the most important impact variable. Temperature has risen in recent times. This is not a trick of people who put measurement stations at different places. And it is warming in recent times faster than we could expect from natural reasons. So there must be an external reason. And the only one which is suitable for explanation is CO2 and greenhouse gases. And then if we ask the same question with other variables, then we come in a hard time. So the issue with the wind, for instance, if we talk about regional or local temperatures or heavy rainfall events. So the detection and attribution, that are the two magic words here, is still a challenge. For temperature, it is done. But we have also strange things such as if we look at what models suggest what should happen if we increase CO2 in the future, and what actually is happening, then, for instance, the rainfall in the Baltic Sea region in fall is opposite. So the models go in one direction, reality goes in the other direction. The same happens at the same time of the year in the Mediterranean Sea, but the other way around. So there's something else going on. Mm-hmm. It is not weakening the argument that in the global scale, there is definitely something going on. And the only explanation we have is that. The problem now is, however, that people tend to attribute whatever adverse things happen to climate change. And the nice thing with the Baltic Sea is, methodically nice thing is, that we have so many drivers which act upon the North Sea. Climate change, then say the change in aerosol load, which is a good thing, interesting thing. We have this eutrophication for the ecosystems. We have ammunition in the sea. We have things which are built through the Baltic Sea. Lots of things. So it is really a very interesting challenge to find out what is doing what and how important is what. And that is not solved, this part. But we see instead that that interested parties are saying, whatever it is CO2. And that's something we should avoid. And that's a challenge for science, for physical science.
Okay.
To do that. So I'm cold about it. And it's not based on personal feeling.
But it grew out of your work.
Yeah.
Right. Now I have two things in my mind. First, I already in the beginning, and even today, I experience that people that ordinary people, as well as many scientists, people tend not to accept the idea that something is changing.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And another thing is that you started to talk about expected increase in windiness. And I agree. I also started to look for increase in storms and windiness back in 1991 when I took my first studies on that. And I went through the records of Finnish Meteorological Office, the monthly records of wind speeds from different directions over the year, and I think I had some record from 50s up to that present 90s, and I couldn't find anything, as you said. I mean, no increase in windiness, no increase in storminess, no increase in wind speed, whatever the direction, over whole Finland. But then there was one additional column that was counted the wind still days, complete calm days. And there was a clear picture. From 60s over the 70s, the number of still days went down. Just like that. And that was the first fact I found that something was going on. And I contacted the Institute of Meteorology. And is this an artifact or not?
Yeah.
And they said no. They see it too. It's happening all over Finland. And then I had something to start to work with. And I think that was my like personally my first acceptance of the situation, that now we have something to work on. There is something in the climate.
Yeah.
And I got my big step forward came in 2005 when I was invited to join the group that you founded, Baltic Assessment of Climate Change. That was a large group organized by you, if I remember, more than 100 voluntary scientists working together to produce a textbook on climate change and the Baltic. But that wasn't started then. I was late incomer. So how did it start with that group? And could you tell about that organization?
That's a relatively simple story. I mean, we had the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, since 1990 or so. And I was there marginally involved, but I knew about it. And then we had a change of directorship. One of the directors at my institute was retiring then, and I took over his part of the institute. It was later divided up in different ways, and there were meteorologists among them, and this guy was also in this Baltex community, Raschke. And so I took that over. I had not been active in that system because Raschke was doing that. So he went out, and I took that over. And then I came to the first meeting, and I asked them, "Have you ever thought about doing something like a regional IPCC report for the Baltics?" "No." "Yeah, we do that now." And so the principle was that we said we have a steering committee. We defined a number of chapters, and we had actually 4. One being marine ecosystems, what is going on there. And we had 1 or 2 so-called lead authors. And then these lead authors then brought in other scientists. But the responsibility was with these lead authors. And in the group of marine scientists, we had a problem, namely the person who took over. Actually, I mean, there was one person who should do the job, but he was a director of another institute, had too much to do, and gave it to somebody whom we, from the very beginning, had said, "Don't do that." But this guy was not able to present the whole breadth of ideas, but he thought he could just present his ideas. So when we were all done, the reviewer noticed that, and we all came to a stop. We came to a halt. So there was a definite danger that we could not complete this because of that chapter, which was simply insufficient. And then the question is, whom could we add to that? And then somebody said, Ilppo. And Ilppo was so kind to say, yes, I do it. And he did it well. So you saved the first bug report to really being printed. So you were a key person in doing so. Sorry to say that. Of course, nobody likes to hear something positive about himself. But I must do it in this case. And I really appreciate your effort, which you did at that time.
Thank you. That's something I didn't realize by the time. I thought I was just invited as a plankton researcher.
No.
Okay.
I mean, you may have been in an early part. Before we really saw we have a real problem here. You may have been involved. But when you took over responsibility for the entire chapter, that was it.
Okay. And now, working with the PAC project gave me a possibility to know top modelers around the Baltic Sea. Yeah. And from that work, I got the idea to one of my best papers I've done so far.
Very good.
So I was making a paper about the future surface water salinity of the Baltic Sea and how the salinity gradient would change with increasing rainfall, and how that would affect the distribution of Baltic Sea fauna and flora. And doing that, I produced a map, and I felt that I was actually really walking the footsteps of great marine researchers like Sven Segerstråle and Arvi Järvekulk. So that was really a huge possibility, a huge experience for me. Step forward. Now, how has the work continued ever since? There were 2 textbooks. Is there a third one coming, or what kind of ideas you have?
Let me first add a little bit to what you said before. I think BAC had several positive consequences. One was that we made this assessment of what do we know and to what extent are we agreeing on this, what are open questions. So that was the original purpose. The other thing is that we really got a good network, an open network, so that also more cross-disciplinary contacts evolved, what you just have described. I did not expect that, but of course I welcome that very much. Yeah. So the community in the Baltic Sea region was really strengthened. And many people worked in this project, even though there was no money flowing. Nobody got anything.
Yeah.
And they did it nevertheless, which is quite uncommon in science. So usually people are joining if they get some money. But so we knew after this exercise who is willing to invest something because he's simply interested. So that was a very interesting filter of people. So that was very efficient. But then we said after, say, 5 years or so, let's see how the knowledge has evolved. Also, after we identified the number of gaps or things of that sort. So we did that again. And we had chaired that again with Anders Omstedt from Göteborg. But we choose different lead authors. So for the chapters, we had more chapters now. We used different ones because we wanted to have an independent review. And we wanted to also to see, do we get the same result? And me as a chair, I did not get involved in the details of what is in there. And essentially, we got the same, but some progress, because some new work had been done. And so we published a second one, which had more chapters, and I think it was done very well. But then I retired, because also the chair, of course, must be changed, because otherwise there's a certain danger that I would put too much pressure on that. And it is now done in the framework of this project called Baltic Earth. And I'm not quite sure what they have agreed, but part of it is going into a series of articles in a research encyclopedia, where I'm strongly involved. But I'm not in these articles, but that is done by Markus Reckermann and Anders Omstedt again. I'm not sure how they will continue this, but there's some continuation in that way.
You have a scientific background. The question is that what kind of study you would like to see done or do for yourself now when you have such experience and on the question of climate change and the Baltic.
If you come along and say, here I have a pile of money and you can hire 2 PhD students.
Yeah.
And they will do whatever you want. And I would say, no, I will not do Baltic Sea. Because I'm no longer the director of my institute. Somebody else is doing that. And the Baltic Sea is a key area or key topic for this institute. And I should not interfere with the field, what my successor is mainly interested in. So I need to go out. But I can immediately, with 2 very different issues, fill these 2 PhD positions. One is the stochastic ocean, and the other is people in the 1960s were very much excited because they had invented the mathematical chaos. The fact that we're very different. The story which is usually told, there's a butterfly in Paris doing something and then a thunderstorm is forming in Buenos Aires, or the other way around. And people tried to find these effects in atmospheric data sets and failed. But now we have much more data, and so I would love to do that. But it's not the Baltic Sea. So for me, I'm done with the Baltic Sea. I love the Baltic Sea. It's a wonderful area. I really like to be here. But scientifically, I must leave it to others because the institute is led by a different person.
So what do you say about one of the ideas that Baltic Sea actions could be seen as a global role model? Could you comment on that?
The concept that something is a world model is suspicious for me, because we have a German saying from Kaiser Wilhelm, am deutschen Wesen soll die Welt genesen. The German character will teach the world something positive. And so the idea that we are front runners and people would look up to us, that is something which gives me bad feelings. On the other hand, the cooperation we have in the Baltic Sea in science is really excellent. On the other hand, I would say people are not taking the size of the problem seriously. They do not understand that we must go away with 38 gigatons CO2 per year. And I'm not sure how much Finland is emitting. Germany is less than 1 gigaton. Even if we accept that we have exported half of our emissions to China, then it would be 2. If we stop emitting all, then we have done 2. If we do it with the EU, then it would be the double, would be 8 gigatons. This is not 38. Yeah. So we have to think about how do we make if we want to do it like that, the 8, we will never manage that, to make it 38. And that is something which is not really discussed. And this is not a matter of goodwill. So that we see the Finns, they are so nice and they don't need heating in winter. So that's really not necessary. They swim all the time in icy water. We know that. Then the Indians will not do that, or the Chinese. No. So we need other arguments. And this discussion is not done, and that needs to be done. And I would also say, why not? It could very well be Finland, where people start to say, it is not enough to have this personal engagement or the engagement of Mariam or whatever. We need somehow to find out how can we move people in other parts of the world to become more environmentally or climate friendly. This is not an easy thing, but and it's not moral. It's not because I see that the Finnish swim in cold water. It must be something else. There must be an economic advantage doing so. And I would say, so for instance, Finland gave us Nokia. Latvia gave us Skype. And the Swedish, I think, gave us mobile phones. This is demonstrating that countries here in the north can reach out with innovations. And if one would put a bit more emphasis on how environmentally friendly are these innovations, that may also help. But I think these are powerhouses with innovations, and we need these innovations. But this needs to be understood.
This 38 gigatons is, I think, compared to 10th of that from Europe, it's a good example to illustrate. The problem is global, really. These are impressive numbers. As I started with the difficulty to accept a change, I still see the same phenomenon all around. Yeah. And if we if we try to transfer the change of opinion to China, it expands. It will be a global problem, really.
Yeah,
to deal with people's attitudes.
Yeah, because they want, of course, also their Porsches and legitimately so. So why should they just say everybody had a Porsche but not me? So that's entirely okay. But we need to understand that this is the size of the problem. And if we're serious about it, we must tackle it. And what we usually see in Europe is that then the threats they are made bigger and bigger and bigger, so that people should be more and more and more scared. Half of them say, no, it's all bullshit to begin with, and we see it now, they do now more and more strange cases, so everything else is also bullshit. So it is really not contributing to a sustainable change of attitude.
Yeah.
So we need to think about this problem, and I would say we have a good chance to contribute to that, because if it's really the innovation which is behind it, we have the raw material for innovation, technical intelligence. So my advice in general is have less people by creating less people.
Yep.
The Chinese actually showed us that. And those children we have should mostly become engineers.
Thank you, Ilppo and Hans. When I listened to you, I started to think about the future projects that you mentioned, Ilppo. You asked Hans the question, but I will ask you the same question. If you will get the funding for a future dream project, and you could, for an example, work with Hans von Storch, what kind of research project would it be for you, Ilppo?
No, after our very enjoyable discussion, I would see that I will not work with Hans. but my ideas that what I was waiting for when reading the last chapters of the second book, I was waiting for some kind of conclusion that what will be the final outcome of a combination of environmental factors which are regionally important, like land rising in the northern part of the Baltic Sea and sinking in the north, and then the increased rainfall which is expected, and then the global sea level rise. And how would that affect the saltwater income to the Baltic Sea? So I would be very interested in seeing these three things combined in some kind of model. But I will not be doing that because I'm very poor in mathematics and modeling. So I would need to do somebody if Hans is not willing to work with the Baltic Sea.
If I take a different name and a different age, then we can talk about it.
Right.
So if I'm just Franz Müller, then we can do it.
Okay.
So you're ready to change your name?
Yeah,
project.
I must be careful with my home institution.
Oh, yeah.
So that I'm not causing repercussions there. So that is why I'm saying I cannot do it. But on the other hand, joining and talking and advising projects, that's a different story. But I must try to be a bit diplomatic. And so it would affect other people as well. But I just wanted to say that it would be a great pleasure, of course, to work with you. But I cannot start from my own in this field. Yeah. If somebody asks me, hey, I need your support here, that's a different story.
Okay. But then you can tell me the name of the statistician or the modeler who could do that.
I think one would need first to discuss about the strategy, how to do it. I'm not sure if I can give you the name. One would be later.
Okay.
Yeah.
A question to you, Hans, also. You talked about cooperation between universities a lot, and you said it's working fine. But could it be improved in any ways? Would you see, with your perspective on cooperation between universities, and if it could be improved, how?
Yeah, first of all, I did not only say universities. I mean also like FMI. So services can play a very important role, and governmental research laboratories like my own. And they are, in a sense, it's easier to work with them because they can do it in a more sustainable way. Universities usually get some money from somebody. When the money is gone, then they can't continue. and then they have to forget it more or less within one day, what they've done so far. So universities are difficult in that sense. Another thing is that it's also helpful if there's a regular contact with two different type of people. One is the stakeholders, and Ilppo spoke about that already. So stakeholders are not necessarily good in giving answers, but they're very helpful in generating questions. And that's what we scientists love most, right? Questions.
Yeah.
And so these could be companies, governments, of course, NGOs. So that would help. And the other thing is we need to think about what is the role of science in society. I mean, that's a difficult thing. That must be a public debate also. But that means we also need to include somehow social sciences. So we must understand that natural sciences are a social process. So we are social actors. We are not free of what everybody else around us is thinking, which history we have and things like that. So we should be aware of that more clearly. To what extent we are steered by something else, which is sitting here and we are not aware of that. So I would say we have to speak more with social scientists.
So breaking silos.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Indeed.
It was an honor to have you here in this podcast. Thank you, Hans.
Yeah, thank you, Lips.
Thank you, Ilppo.
Thank you.
We will be back with a new episode next month, a new interesting meeting, a new award winner and a new topic. Thanks for listening. My name is Jens Berg.